Good Monday morning. What do you want to talk about? Welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. I'm so glad that you joined us this morning. Needless to say, the show will be mostly dedicated to the Kamala Harris campaign. Yes, President Joe Biden decided not to run for re-election as of yesterday. We, as you are well aware, I'm sure, we're going to be talking about it, what it means, give you a little bit of who, what, when, where, and why. And we'll talk about what this could mean for the convention. First, a comment late from a viewer, and I received a lot of comments over the weekend. I appreciate it. To the person who sent me the one to do a little research on, I did not have a chance yet this morning to look into it. I'm not familiar with that. So I want to get you all the information, accurate information, as we always try to do here on the program. Okay, first, a comment right after the show yesterday. Absolutely amazing show. Thank you so much for squeezing me in at the last second. I really had my doubts that you would have time. Yes, we had a lot of comments on Friday's show. I love that you loaded up with comments, and all of them made very valid points, very educated audience. I'm definitely a big fan of your fans. I am too. We do have a very educated audience. That's why none of us were caught off guard with yesterday's announcement. We were preparing for it. Now we speculate who will be the VP. Now, did you learn it turns out you learned alongside the Biden campaign that he was dropping out. Staffers reportedly blindsided after the president drops out of the race. We're all finding out by tweet, said one staffer. He told the senior team right before. I'm sure they didn't want it to leak, one source said. We're all finding out by tweet. None of us understand what is happening. The campaign put out an email blast seeking donations for Joe and Kamala just 8 minutes after Biden announced he was ending his candidacy. Not the best timing, but many of those things scheduled way in advance. I don't think a soul in Delaware knew, a Biden state official told the outlet. So you were learning alongside the Biden staff. Now, the Democrats raised $46.7 million hours after Biden dropped out. And Biden did back Harris to be president. Many didn't. Some big names have kind of sat on the sidelines, waiting to see maybe what happens when the smoke clears. Democrats raised an eye-popping $46.7 million after President Biden dropped his re-election bid and backed Harris to run against Donald Trump. The massive influx of cash marked the single largest fundraising day for online party contributions since the last presidential election, according to the New York Times. The group that received the lion's share, Act Blue, which is used by Biden-Harris campaign for small dollar donors, it said it raised the incredible figure by about 9 p.m. yesterday, adding that Sunday had the highest amount of donations of the entire 2024 election cycle thus far. So what do you think this all means? I don't think any of us have the answers to that. Who do you think will be the VP? Do you think Harris will go unchallenged? Joe Manchin already signaling that he's thinking about maybe challenging her. What does this look like for the convention? We're going to get to that here in just a little bit as well. Also, we'll talk about some of the endorsements and non-endorsements. Congressman Nick Langworthy released a statement on social media yesterday calling for Biden, and many others too, not just our congressman, but many others calling for Biden to step down as president too. If he can't run for re-election, he shouldn't be in the White House is the thought. We're going to get to that as well. I'd love to hear what you have to say about all of this and much more. Now, Kamala Harris has formally taken over the Biden-Harris campaign account. She's the only one that could because both names were on that account. The Biden-Harris campaign on Sunday formally amended filings with the Federal Election Commission to rename its principal committee and declare Kamala Harris a candidate for president. The move means that she remain on the ticket for the general election. Harris could assume control of the Biden-Harris campaign account, which has nearly $96 million cash in hand at the end of June. Specifically, because Biden and Harris share a campaign committee, the vice president and her running mate can continue using the campaign's existing funds for the general election if she is on the Democratic ticket as either the presidential or vice presidential nominee. Do you think it goes smoothly? I see the media already has the glowing puff pieces, already praising Harris. Now, we know Harris, she's been vetted. You can say that. But we know the media has never really focused on her all that much. Now they're making sure that she's the greatest thing that could ever happen to this country. So here's some who, what, when, where, and why. David Weigel at Semaphore says, can Democrats actually replace Biden before the convention? Yes. Biden has withdrawn and will release his 3,904 delegates who were selected last month. The newly unbound delegates will pick the new nominee. When Democrats speculate about a mini primary or open convention, what they mean is that these delegates, along with the 37 uncommitted delegates, we know them as superdelegates, and the 8 won by candidates who dropped out already, can vote for whoever they want to. DNC rules state that in the event of death, resignation, or disability of a nominee after the convention, the party chair will confer with Democratic leaders in Congress and the Democratic Governors Association. After that, the DNC will pick the nominee. In 2016, then DNC chair Donna Brazile studied that backup plan after Hillary Clinton collapsed from pneumonia at a 9/11 commemoration service. Remember that? The candidate she saw as the most credible Clinton replacement was, of course, Joe Biden. So what's the deadline? It varies a bit by state, but the DNC begins on August 19th, and the nominating roll call would normally happen on August 20th. So I don't know if there is a virtual roll call. They were talking about that at one point. Now, who are the delegates that will be supporting either Harris or someone else? Party regulars who support Joe Biden, not the sort of people who usually show up to a convention in a rebel mood. There are also hundreds of automatic delegates. The term superdelegates got toxic back in 2016 when Bernie Sanders made an issue out of them in his primary campaign. But they don't vote unless no candidate has a majority in the first ballot. So that's when they become a major factor. So if they don't have enough delegates, let's say Harris, for argument's sake, doesn't have enough delegates, that's when those superdelegates, as so many people complain about, and rightfully so. I mean, the fix was in against Bernie from the beginning. And if you're a Bernie fan, you know that. Now, could Democrats run a different nominee than Harris? They could, hence the ongoing parlor game about popular Democrat to be determined, leading the party out of the quicksand. But only Harris, whose name is on the campaign organizing documents, could inherit the campaign resources. Now, many are asking, will Republicans sue? Potentially. 3 days before the debate, the Heritage Foundation shared a memo about the potential for pre-election litigation aimed at exasperating, with legitimate concern for election integrity, the withdrawal process for a presidential candidate. But Democrats see that as a head fake. The memo, for example, warns that Wisconsin prohibits withdrawal except in the case of death. But state law is clear. Nominees chosen at a national convention by each major party are on the ballot. So there we go. There's a little bit of, and there's a lot of pieces like that out this morning where, CNN tries to fill in the gaps of what you may or may not know. Wow, lots of comments coming in. We'll be reading those after the first break. So Harris is the most likely, but, you've got names like Gavin Newsom, though Gavin Newsom came out and endorsed Harris right after this happened. It could be a very interesting convention. I do think it does kind of stink that this was done after the Republican National Convention, so the Republicans didn't have an opportunity to go after, if you will, Harris on her record. Remember, Harris is the border czar. She was tasked with securing the border. So then CNN answers the question, is Biden still the president? Yes. This just pertained to his role as the candidate in November. Many are calling for him to resign from the presidency. What do you think? That would help Harris to have a little bit of incumbency. Now, Biden endorsing Harris does not make her the nominee. A number of prominent Democrats quickly threw their support behind Harris, but some did not. And that we'll get to here in just a little bit. But none of that automatically makes her the nominee. That's all going to be at the convention. Who else could be the new nominee if not Harris? While Harris received Biden's endorsement, the names of many prominent Democrat lawmakers have been unofficially floated as alternatives. On Sunday night, sources close to Senator Joe Manchin said that Manchin is considering re-registering as a Democrat and throwing his hat in the ring. Manchin had called for Biden to bow out of the race Sunday morning on State of the Union. So there we go. That's kind of a quick overview to kick off the program this morning. A lot of comments coming in a little bit later on in the program. We are going to hear from Joe Barlow about that August event with the Crystal Chords, and we've got a new song from Mach 4 that she sent along. We always look forward to that. So what do you think? When you heard the news last night, I'm sure you weren't necessarily surprised. Now, some people were speculating that, and this proves to be the case a little bit, that Joe Biden very upset with the party elites turning on him. Many people thought that would make him dig in his heels. But in this case, it did not. He finally saw the writing on the wall and said, I can't run for re-election. It caused the far left, the liberal media, as the New York Times or the New York Post puts it, they went into a meltdown. We're going to talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. We are just getting started on your Monday morning edition of Frankly Speaking. We'll be right back. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. So many great comments to kick off the program. Am I wrong? Asked one viewer. When Harris ran for president, she even lost her own state. She never made it that far. She never got a single primary vote. Her campaign crumbled, and she gave up before the first vote was cast. Her only real claim to fame during that presidential run was that she called her now boss a bigot. Next comment. Just not sure how this election turns out since Kamala had such large donations come in. It all hinges on a super strong pick for VP. Could this be a rematch with Hillary back in? The gloves will definitely be off if Clinton rolls back in. Well, I did see, as you probably did as well, the Clintons instantly endorsed Harris. Interesting. I don't know. I know some people had been throwing around Hillary's name. Another comment from a viewer. Frank, I was confident that Biden would step aside, but missed the mark on when. I'm sure that Biden and the Democrats came to an agreement over the weekend on the conditions attached with him stepping down. Probably promises that Hunter will face no jail time on the current and any future charges, that Biden and the rest of the Biden crime family will face no charges for selling access to the big guy, and most likely a multi-million-dollar book deal to fund Biden into the future. Now to focus on Kamala. She will not stay at the top of the ticket. The Democrats will now negotiate with her on what it will take for her to willingly step aside. California governor, Supreme Court justice, multi-million-dollar book deal. Whatever ends up being, it will be substantial. Thank you, Ken. Keep those comments coming in. Speaking of Hunter, I guess there's a lot of people in the Democrat Party that were getting more frustrated that, or it says here the word used by Ryan King, seethed at Joe Biden for relying on Hunter Biden so much. Hunter was spotted sitting in on meetings in the West Wing, and some aides felt he was playing a crucial role in helping his father navigate questions about his fitness for office. He and his son are playing the victimhood thing. I was mistreated under Obama, one anonymous senior administration official told Politico. It's insane. He was mistreated, but he conjures this up in his head, and once it's there, it's very hard. Or let me reword that. It's insane. He wasn't mistreated, but he conjures this up in his head, and once it's in there, it's very hard to get out. Many of the White House and Biden administration broadly felt somewhat walled off from the president's inner orbit, according to Politico. Hunter has credited his father for helping him during his crack cocaine addiction and even hailed him for helping to save my life. For his whole life, he's been trying to protect Hunter, meaning Joe. Encourage Hunter to step up. Encourage Hunter to be the person he wants him to be. Finally, Hunter is doing that. He's stepping up. And who is he protecting? It's not the father protecting the son. It's the son protecting the father. And there's a bonding moment that none of us totally understand. All of a sudden, you have something that the father has wanted his whole life with his son, and he's finally getting it now in a weird way. Yeah, not too many. Well, Hunter's got to be worried about his future with this. But before he leaves, I mean, you figure Biden's got 3.5 more months as president. It's going to be a wild 3.5 months. But he could perhaps pardon Hunter now that he's a lame duck. A lot could happen in this last 3.5 month lame duck presidency. Well, a little more than that because it wouldn't be until January. Yeah, did you watch the liberal media just melt down? Van Jones actually crying on camera. Van Jones on CNN broke into tears on Sunday as he delivered an emotional reaction to the news that Biden was dropping out of the 2024 race. The senior political commentator said he was heartbroken over the decision and compared the Democrat situation to taking the car keys away from a relative who has become too old to drive. He's fighting and everybody's so frustrated. And then you finally get the keys back and then you just cry. he said, as he broke down on national TV, because this is somebody that you love. This is somebody that you care about. This is somebody who was there for you. This is somebody you wouldn't be here without. And you had to do something, and you had to take something from him. Van Jones slammed the recent media coverage that he claimed had painted Biden as some problem for the party. I don't know anything about politics. I just know that I love this man. I care about this man, he said. Along with Jones, Senator Chris Coons also appeared distraught over the news live on the air. The folks in Delaware who've been texting me and calling me in the last few hours all want me to say to Joe Biden how much we love him, how much we admire and respect his service, and how grateful we are for the decisions he's made over decades in his service and his tireless loyalty to our home state of Delaware. Coons said as he stopped to sob for a few seconds before composing himself. This is what covers his news. He is the greatest Delawarean in our history. And the fact he has chosen to be grounded in our community, in our parish, in our parishes, in the traditions and history of bipartisanship, and of respecting each other and of being compassionate and decent, he added. Jen Psaki also appeared to be taken back. Now remember, Jen Psaki, her former boss is Joe Biden, now MSNBC anchor. I'm digesting this myself here because I worked for him for a year and a half, and he is a remarkable person, a remarkable president. Before Psaki read Biden's letter, she could be heard stuttering and pausing before going into the details, with MSNBC anchor later noting on X that the news caught everyone off guard. Did it really? I mean, we reported on Friday that it was, a lot of people were speculating that the president wouldn't make it through the weekend. So, I mean, I guess it could catch you off guard a little bit, but to this level, there's very little indication from people close to him and many people in the campaign that this was about to happen, as much as there were reports of Democrats calling on him to do just that. Biden's sudden announcement has not only thrown Democrats' plans into chaos, but also upended CNN anchor Wolf Blitzer's Sunday afternoon. Blitzer could be seen on X ordering a signature Wolf Spritzer cocktail at the El Presidente restaurant in Washington, D.C. at around 1 p.m. before he was forced to return to the CNN newsroom just an hour later to discuss Biden's dropping out. Many sympathetic journalists shared memes of the CNN mainstay's dour face after being forced to broadcast yet another momentous news moment of the day. Isn't that interesting? Think of this last, month? Has it even been a month since the debate? Well, I can't remember the exact day that fell on last month, but let's just say a month. Imagine how much history has been made in that month. We have been witnessing it in real time, and it's a major story every single day. I was thinking, good thing this summer I didn't plan any long vacation. I would have hated to miss today, and that's why I'm so happy to be on the air, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio and hearing your comments. But it has just been a major, historic month, hasn't it? NBC News says that Biden is I don't like to use this word on the air, but we'll just say really mad. Really mad. Biden came grudgingly to accept that he could not sustain his campaign with poll numbers slipping, donors fleeing, and party luminaries pushing him to exit. He may have been slower than other Democrat insiders to make that calculation, but he fully understood it by Saturday night. The account of this critical weekend and what's left to Biden's stunning announcement came from interviews with 24 Democrats familiar with what transpired. In a phone call, Biden told his vice president, his chief of staff, his campaign chair, that he would abandon his reelection bid. The fact that he had to inform them in such a manner underscores the degree which his circle had tightened in recent days to just family members and a few longtime aides and advisors. The outcome may not have surprised White House and campaign officials, but the timing did. Most found out, along with the rest of the world, when Biden published his post on X. The same was true for DNC officials and state party chairs. Senior Biden aides scrambled to set up separate meetings to talk to staff members for the White House and the campaign, reassuring the political aides that their jobs were safe. As it always is, the end was abrupt, but it came after a hellish 25-day stretch. There we go, sparked by the most disastrous debate performance in modern American history. That was on June 27th, so not even a month. Biden failed to reassure fellow Democrats, or enough of them, in his follow-up appearances. As we know, major donors cut off the money. And you remember when I had former Congressman Joe Semplinsky on the program, that was my thought, that it wasn't about Obama or Pelosi or whoever calling him to resign or to quit the campaign. It was going to be about donors at the end of the day. In drip fashion, elected officials started to call for him to drop his bid. There was less light than darkness on the horizon. On Saturday, he spoke with Pelosi, a conversation her office denied. CNBC reported, citing a person with direct knowledge of the interaction. Pelosi, whose top close aides publicly called for him to leave the race, as she stopped just short of that in recent weeks, but did not respond to a text message seeking comments. So we don't have to go through all of this. But I guess I would have to kind of reiterate what Ken said. I think we all expected Biden to step down. We just weren't sure of the timing. And this really makes it, if it is Harris at the top of the ticket, it makes it more difficult to vet her VP candidate as a Republican standpoint. We also missed a whole convention time where we could have went after Harris for her stances. So it's going to be a tight 3.5 months. Will there be another debate? Who will be the presidential or the vice presidential candidate who would potentially debate J.D. Vance? Now, if you recall, the Trump campaign said that they would not confirm a VP debate because they didn't know who the VP was going to be. So very much calling what happened on the weekend. But not only is Biden upset, there are some Democrats behind the scenes, party leadership. They're upset of how Biden was pushed out. We'll talk about that when we come back. Weigh in on the topic of the day. What do you think? Who's going to be the VP? Do you think it'll be Harris at the top of the ticket? Let me know. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, just looking at all these great comments coming in from viewers. Wonder if Biden leaves the office so Kamala automatically becomes president. That would be interesting. I agree with that, because then if you're a Democrat, that would probably be the best move, only because that gives her the incumbency, which is, even that small amount of time, would be a bonus for her. Wonder if Biden leaves the office. Okay, moving ahead here. Then who automatically becomes VP? Yeah, Speaker of the House. So that means Mike Johnson would be VP. We are a heartbeat from that happening. A very interesting point. I had not thought about that. Would you imagine that? Another comment from a different viewer. The Democrat Party is allowed to keep things covered up because the media, academia, and social media only allows Democrats to see the narrative they want to be known. When someone says they are surprised about Biden stepping down, wouldn't it make sense to point out that most everyone has known for years what the truth is, except for Democrats? That's a very good point. And that's why a lot of people are saying it's outrageous that you've covered this up for at least 3.5 years. And now we're just supposed to accept the fact that everything's back on track and it's Harris. Now, Democrats, as I mentioned, are upset behind the scenes. Some party leadership upset. Former South Carolina state lawmaker and CNN analyst Bakari Sellers said Democrat voters were mad, we'll say, by Biden's decision to withdraw from the race, blaming party leadership for pressuring him to suspend his campaign. In an interview on CNN Newsroom, Sellers said his phone has been blowing up. That's the new thing. Everybody's got to talk about how many phone calls and texts they're getting. Why is that? With concerned Democrats fearful that Kamala Harris will be pushed off the ticket as they believe Biden was following his announcement that he is ending his re-election bid. My phone is blowing up with people who are mad. And the reason they're mad is because they feel like people from on high pushed Joe Biden out the door. Well, that's pretty typical. If you think about the Democrat Party, the Democrat Party does not believe in their voters, or in any voters, but specifically the Democrat voters. Look at the fix being in for Hillary Clinton over Joe Biden. Or over Bernie Sanders, excuse me. But I think there's a point to be had here. It's always the power brokers. It's always the kingmakers in the Democrat Party that have the final say. A text that I got from a friend was like, if they push Joe Biden out the door, what are they going to do with Kamala Harris? They'll probably try to push her too. That's a great deal of fear out there. And the people who have done the damage, the Nancy Pelosi's, the Chuck Schumers, those elders in leadership. It would behoove us all if they came out and wrapped their arms around Harris sooner rather than later, and probably save those celebratory mimosas for another day. Top Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer reportedly told Biden in a blunt one-on-one conversation last week it would be best if he bowed out of the race. Pelosi doing the same. We don't need to go through that history. Now, Congressman Nick Langworthy, our congressman, Facebooked out on Friday, I believe it was, or on Sunday, excuse me. If Joe Biden, this is Congressman Nick Langworthy, if Joe Biden is not fit to run for president, he is not fit to serve as president. I'm calling on him to resign immediately. Democrat power brokers have known for 5 years how unfit to lead our nation he has been. They and their media partners have covered it up and lied about it. They are shredding democracy with their theft of will of primary voters and are showing their hypocrisy to the whole world. However, Biden's terrible record is Kamala Harris's terrible record. President Trump will defeat whoever they coronate and restore this nation and its future to greatness as our 47th president. Thank you to Congressman Nick Langworthy. There's others calling for Biden to resign. Do you think, I don't think there's any way he resigns, right? And it's going to be a wild 3.5 months. Now, I know he's still got to work with the House and things like that, but we could definitely see some damage done out the door as a lame duck president. He is now a lame duck president. Mike Johnson, J.D. Vance, they've called for Biden to resign now. Not running for re-election would be a clear admission that President Trump was right all along about Biden not being mentally fit enough to serve as commander-in-chief, J.D. Vance said. There is no middle ground. If Joe Biden ends his re-election campaign, how can he justify remaining president? Not running for re-election would be a clear admission that President Trump was right all along about Biden not being mentally fit enough to serve as commander-in-chief. There is no middle ground. That's J.D. Vance. House Speaker Mike Johnson, who to that viewer's point could be VP, also immediately called on Biden to resign. If Joe Biden is not fit to run for president, he is not fit to serve as president. He must resign the office immediately. November 5th cannot arrive soon enough. Now, Representative from New York, Elise Stefanik, someone who many thought had the potential of being the VP pick for Trump, said the Democrat Party is in absolute freefall for their blatantly corrupt and desperate attempt to cover up the fact that Joe Biden is unfit for office. And that's a very good point. They have been covering this up, to the viewer's point as well. They have been covering this up because they control the narrative. They control the media. Josh Hawley said, then resign your office. If you can't run a mere political campaign, you can't be president. Steve Daines saying, being president is the hardest job in the world, and I no longer have confidence that Joe Biden can effectively execute his duties as commander-in-chief. Savannah Villar, Deputy Communications Director for the for the National Republican Congressional Committee, said Democrats can't have it both ways. If Joe Biden can't handle a debate or a rally, he can't stand up to Putin or have access to the nuclear codes. Yeah, the weakness that we are signaling across the world should really terrify all of us. Think about, is China going to maybe say, well, now's the time, go into Taiwan? What is Putin thinking? You know, after seeing that debate and now seeing the president admit that he cannot run for office, he is not fit enough to run for office, think of the signal that sends across the world. Upon quitting, Biden immediately endorsed Harris to take his spot atop the ticket. So will he step aside and let her have those final few months of incumbency? Now, Paul Duquesnoy, he is the president of the Palm Beach Freedom Institute. He said on Sunday, President Biden chose National Ice Cream Day to announce he will not seek re-election for a second term, endorsing Harris to take over as the Democrat Party's presidential nominee. Now, I'm going to tell you more about what he had to say. I just realized I'm running late. Keep those comments coming in. Keep those waves coming in. Were you surprised by the news? I think if you watch this program, you're not necessarily surprised. I think no one knew the time frame, but it seemed like a matter of when, not if. Though there was something to be said about his ego and stubbornness. But at the end of the day, he did what the power brokers, the kingmakers, told him to do. So we're going to talk so much more about this. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back, Frankly Speaking, pardon me, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio, just looking at my article here, and I got tongue-tied. Yes, we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio, and coming up a little bit later on, we'll be talking with Joe Barlow. That's in the 7 o'clock hour. You won't want to miss that. We do have a new song from Mach 4 as well. We look forward to that. So I was mentioning this Paul Duquesnoy, who has this piece in the New York Post saying, Joe must resign as president now. Incompetent Biden puts the world in grave danger. And to that point, we received a comment from a viewer during break. If they get Biden to resign, and I just want to make clear, I don't think they will get him to resign. I think that may be, in my opinion, a bridge too far. Yes, they got him to leave the race, but they don't want it to be a Harris, Mike Johnson administration. Continuing here. If they get Biden to resign, the political chessboard could once again be flipped over We are definitely seeing history unfold. The question is, what direction we will look back on with regret? Ooh, that's a good point. That's a good question. Okay, but back to this piece. If he, meaning Biden, had any respect for the office he holds, the American people, our republic, or himself, Biden would resign from the presidency immediately. No one said campaigning for re-election was easy. The schedule is punishing. A candidate must address supporters, schmooze with donors, pose for photo ops, and travel to events around the country. He or she is expected to debate the other party's nominee, and we all know how that turned out when Biden faced off against former President Donald Trump on June 27th. Biden's sagging poll performance explains his decision to withdraw. Much more so than any fake notion of civic virtue, his spineless supporters are floating on social media to prop up the Democrat Party's dismal chances and tarnished image. Yeah, remember, the only reason they ever called for him to resign from his campaign is not because of health issues or his actual mental capabilities. It's because the poll numbers show he couldn't get elected. Because at the end of the day, that's all that matters, is to stay in power. A poll of voters in the vitally important swing state of Michigan, released just hours before his withdrawal, found Biden trailing Trump by a huge margin of 7%. But no campaign trail challenge comes even close to the immense responsibility of serving as president of the United States, which Biden, whose own staff members say has only a few lucid hours per day and cannot be disrupted after 4 p.m., is manifestly unqualified to do. The world has become a dangerous place under Biden's disastrous leadership. 2 active, large-scale shooting wars, both started after ruthless overseas adversaries looked at Biden and saw a tired, feebled old man who neither would nor could do enough to resist them, are in progress and could easily spread. Our southern border is a nightmare, open to millions of migrants who enter the country illegally, with horrific effects on our already crime-ridden communities, while the president lounges at his Delaware beach house like Nero without a fiddle. Our standing in the world is a joke, with even sympathetic international leaders fretting about the mental soundness of a leader of the free world given to falling asleep and wandering off during NATO summits. Remember, we were told that was a cheap fake. You can't report on that. Ultimately, no amount of media gaslighting could convince a majority of Americans, or even a majority of Democrats, that Biden could carry on. If now he admits he is too weak and addled to kiss babies, he has no business commanding our armed forces, holding the nuclear codes, or doing anything else that could affect the safety and security of our country and as people. Now we know with crystal clarity that Biden is totally unfit for the job and probably has been for his entire presidency. If he stays in the White House for the next 6 months while signaling to the malign forces of the world that he is too incompetent even to try to be reelected, we will suffer more than just an October surprise before he finally stumbles out of the White House. For the good of the country and the good of the world, Biden must enter the dustbin of history now. All right. I thought that was a very good point. The National Review calls on Biden to resign immediately in a scathing piece. The National Review editorial board called on Biden to resign on Sunday after he announced he would not seek re-election. Biden should take the next logical step and resign the presidency. It's possible to imagine a president not being able to campaign but still capable of carrying out his official duties, say if he had a serious physical impairment. And it's even possible to imagine a president who could serve for another 6 months but not another 4.5 years. But such scenarios do not apply to Joe Biden. The group of senior editors at the National Review cheered Biden for doing the right thing in the end and ending the charade of asking the American public to believe that he was capable of serving another 4 years as president. This was preposterous, and the public, as the polling has consistently shown for a long time, didn't believe it. But you've got to remember, you've got to take a side note. Remember how long that they've lied to you, those in the media. Lied to you this whole time. And they're not even sheepish about it. It doesn't even bother them that now they have to report on his mental health. While Biden has obviously been confused in public, we are getting disturbing reports of his not recognizing friends and Democrat lawmakers in private. Whatever the level of his decline at the moment, it is sure to get worse. The country deserves to have complete assurance that the President of the United States, whatever his party or ideology is fully in possession of his faculties. Democrats won't be in the fix if Biden and his family had taken full accounting of his age when they decided to run against the last year, and if the White House, Democrat leaders, the press, and various other insiders hadn't undertaken an effort to cover up Biden's state of mind, They all knew what was going on, but figured that if they didn't talk about it, somehow people wouldn't notice. But of course, at the end of the day, they did. That cover-up was intended to deceive the American people, but its first victims were Democrat primary voters who were denied a real choice or a real say in their party's nominee. The serious potential candidates were sidelined by pressure to close ranks publicly behind Biden, who refused to debate the few marginal primary opponents he attracted. The editors called on the Democrat Party to apologize to Representative Dean Phillips, who repeatedly warned about Biden's current state, but was dismissed for saying the quiet part out loud. This shameful performance that literally puts the country at risk should never be forgotten, the editorial board said. In isolation, Democrats would be better served to look beyond Harris, ideally to a governor, and a more moderate image. But Biden's endorsement, the compressed timetable, and the difficulty of passing over an African-American woman will presumably make that very difficult, if not impossible. At least the centerpiece of the Democrat campaign will no longer be a flagrant falsehood that nearly everyone recognizes as such. Biden is no longer offering himself up as the next president of the United States until January of 2029. And if he really wants to put the country first, as he said in his statement, he should resign the presidency right now. If Joe, and so many people calling for that, what are your thoughts? I don't see a scenario where he resigns. I think he goes these next 6 months and just tries to do as much as he can to push the liberal agenda and then move on. As Miranda Devine said, if Joe Biden is too frail to run in 2024, is he still our president? We're going to talk about that as well. When we come back, stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. This is Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank Aiken. Boy, this hour's going quick. Keep those comments coming in. Miranda Devine does a great job at the New York Post, and she says we're still stuck with Joe Biden as president for 6 months. He might have passed the political torch to VP Kamala Harris, but he still has control of the nuclear football, or maybe Dr. Jill or Hunter does. Either way, it's a frightening message to send to the world. The U.S. president is too cognitively impaired to run for re-election in November, but he's staying on as commander-in-chief until January. You can bet that leaving the president in place, despite the obvious peril to America, was part of the deal Biden struck to go quietly, as Nancy Pelosi and the Obamas ratcheted up the pain. Staying in the White House until January 20th gives Biden plenty of time to orchestrate pardons for Hunter and his brother Jim and whomever else in the family is in legal trouble. Regardless of what he claimed before Hunter's felony gun conviction, the pardon was always coming. No way does the family trust Kamala to do the deed. You could bet Air Force One and Camp David will be working overtime for as many dream holidays and bucket list wishes for as many extended family members as he can squeeze in. Perhaps another ancestral trip to Ireland or to Rome for a last blessing from his favorite pope. It will be one long victory lap. 6 months is plenty of time to burnish Biden's legacy with the help of the so-called historians who have been wearing a hole in the carpet of his office and the complacent media who have ignored his corruption and cognitive decline for years. Plenty of time to bask in the praise from his fellow Democrats. It's already rampant on MSNBC and on Twitter as Democrats trip over each other to wax lyrical about the greatest president that ever lived, the good and decent man, Honest Joe, who always put his country first. Rachel Maddow, and I quote, said, one of the most selfless things a president could do. He put his ego aside. I guess that's how one way of describing saving your own skin when there's a gun at your head. You know, the financial incentives must have been part of Biden's exit package as well. After all, for over 50 years, he and his extended family have lived high on the power and influence in Washington. That all comes to a screeching halt next January unless he engineers a golden parachute. I thought this was really interesting. We didn't have time to get to all of it. But what does this mean for the future? Who do you think will be Kamala's VP? Do you have an opinion on this? Yes, many people, and here's a comment from a viewer, be careful what you wish for. I'm going to get into more of what your text says here in just a moment. But yeah, there is an idea here that could be careful what you wish for. We don't know what the future holds. This is going to be, well, it's a historic, unprecedented time, as the media likes to use those terms so frequently. But thank you for all the comments coming in. We'll continue to read those after the break. I'm just looking at all come in, and I want to make sure that I have them all in order. Who do you think will be the VP? Do you think, well, it's got to be the most important VP pick, perhaps, in history. Now, that is if Kamala's still at the top of the ticket. There's no guarantee there. Oh, yeah, here's a question from a viewer. I really liked RFK Jr.'s press conference. Did you see it? I did see some of it. I'm going to get to that here in just a little bit. Now, if you're a Democrat, what are your thoughts on this? Also, I would ask the question, do you feel cheated if you donated to the Biden campaign? Do you feel that, because towards the end, Biden was outspending Trump 6-1, trying to get his poll numbers back up so he could stay in. That was Democrat donations. Would you be upset if you're not a Democrat? Would you be upset if that was your money being spent when you knew it was most likely going to end poorly, that Biden was going to step down from the campaign? So we're going to talk about that and much more as we wrap up our number one of Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. When we come back, your comments, and don't forget, in the next hour, we'll be talking with Joe Barlow from the Crystal Chords. We'll find out all about their upcoming August event. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. A couple comments from viewers. Things are in a be careful what you wish for mode at this point. The Dems lately can only think about now instead of what their actions could cause for the future. Same as forced electric cars, trucks, and even military tanks without seeing consequences. Thank you very much. Another comment from a different viewer. Frank, the Democrats, including Harris, have stated that they have the lowest unemployment rate since whenever, or something to that effect. Aren't they making an untrue boast? Yes. Aren't they really spouting off about and taking credit for post-COVID recovery? Yes. I know this comment is a diversion from today's discussion, but aren't Democrats essentially lying? Yeah, and when Nancy Pelosi got called on it by Katie Tour from MSNBC. MSNBC's Katie Tour said, well, yeah, come on, you're talking unprecedented numbers with COVID, so you can't. And Nancy Pelosi, because the Democrats never used to getting a tough question or fair question even, she snapped and suggested that Katie Tur was a Trump apologist. Even Katie going, I don't think anybody's ever called me that. So they've got their talking points. They're going to continue to push them. I don't know if they can rein Harris in away from what she's become notorious for, which is those word salads. I'm not sure if, they've had all this time to work with her. I don't know how that's going to play out. To the other viewer's point about be careful what you wish for, sure. I mean, I think Biden was definitely easier to beat. Now, the polls show that Harris is not very popular either, but could depend a lot on who her VP pick is. Now, I know a lot of people are suggesting maybe Michelle Obama, maybe Hillary Clinton. I don't know if Hillary Clinton helps. I think Michelle Obama would be very tough to beat. But as I said, would you be upset if you were a Democrat donor? Joe Biden, his camp outspent Donald Trump 6-1 in June as the president slipped further into the polls before bowing out. Biden's campaign shelled out $59.4 million during the month of June compared to the Trump campaign's $9.9 million expenditures in the same month. During the same stretch of time, Trump began June with a 2.2 point lead. How do you like that? And ended with an expanded 3.2 point advantage. What a weird way to say that. Former President Trump took to Truth Social yesterday, raising the questions of whether the party should be reimbursed for fraud for the cash it's invested campaigning against Biden. So we are forced to spend time and money on fighting crooked Joe Biden. He polls badly after having a terrible debate and quits the race. Now we have to start all over again. Shouldn't the Republican Party be reimbursed for fraud and that everybody around Joe, including his doctors and the fake news media, knew he was not capable of running for or being president? Just ask him, Trump said. I think that's a fair question. And it's the same with a convention. We had a convention where now it's a missed opportunity where we could have went after Harris instead of Biden. Now, like the former president said, you start from scratch. The FEC, Federal Election Commission Chairman Sean Cooksey, has announced that all donations made to Joe Biden for the November election shall be either returned or refunded or redesignated as appropriate following his departure from the presidential race. Interesting. I don't know where that goes. He wrote in the Wall Street Journal, before the nomination officially goes to Mr. Biden, the campaign is limited to donating $2,000 to the Democrat nominee, whether that new standard bearer is Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, or Miss Harris. I'm not going to go through the whole piece on this, but Biden's drop out comes just days after the DNC indicated their intentions to formally nominate Biden in an early August virtual roll call. Oh, we got a lot of comments coming in. Yes, one viewer talking about the RFK Jr. Press conference. He has now said this is a two-man race after Biden dropped his presidential bid. Speaking at a hastily called press conference from his family's storied compound in Hyannisport, Massachusetts, Kenny praised Biden while simultaneously blaming Democrat Party leaders for hiding his mental decline. I want to begin by commending President Biden for a career in public service, a long career in representing and serving our country, and for his handling of the many difficulties and challenges, personal challenges and tragedies that he suffered during his life, with so much admirable conduct and the empathy that he derives from those experiences. The reaction of the DNC to that obvious condition, meaning his mental health condition, was to hide it from the American public and to use their power over the Democrat Party nomination process to make sure that nobody could compete with Biden in a way that would expose his deficiencies. President Trump has a connection to the American people, a populist connection. But in many ways, it's the same fraudulent connection that we saw with the DNC over the past year, concealing a real purpose of their objective, which was to give us a president that represents corporate interests rather than the interests of the American public. If the Democrats do what I suspect they're going to do, which is to anoint Kamala Harris, a vice president who is monumentally unpopular within her own party, they're doing it because it's the easiest way to hold on to the money. All right, we got a lot of comments coming in, a lot of waves. This hour of Frankly Speaking is through. RFK Jr. also said that Kamala Harris is a war hawk on Ukraine. She's a war hawk on China. Claimed that Harris has one of the worst civil rights records of any public officials. So we've got a lot more other comments from other people as well. What do you think? Who will the VP be under Harris? Do you think Harris will stay at the top of the ticket? Boy, we live in historic times. And that's why I'm so glad that you joined us this morning. In the next hour, Joe Barlow will be our guest from Crystal Chords. You won't want to miss that because we have a special song from Mach 4 after that interview. So stay with us. Hour number 1 in the books. Hour number 2 on its way in mere moments. Get those comments in. We'll read them at the top of the hour. We've got plenty left to talk about, so stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back with hour number 2. Hour number 2 here on Frankly Speaking. Thank you so much for joining us. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I'm your host, Frank Aiken. We've got a lot of great comments coming in. Let's get right to them. Coming up in a little bit, Joe Barlow will be our guest from the Crystal Chords. We'll find out about their upcoming events in August. Also, I want to remind you that the Salvation Army of Corning, who is in need after the normal kettle campaign was just not as successful as in years past. Well, coming up this week, all week, you can make donations to the Salvation Army and small kettles at various businesses on Market Street. Here's a list. They're all kind of having a friendly competition with themselves to see who could do the most good, raise the most money for the Salvation Army of Corning. So if you are at any of these businesses this week, please donate a little bit to the Salvation Army of Corning. Butcher's Son, Sorges, Mooney's, Connor's Mercantile, Bottles and Corks, Anelio's Pizza. So if you're at any of those places this week, please think about donating to the Salvation Army of Corning. All right, comments from viewers. Question: if they get Biden to resign and Mike Johnson becomes VP, is there any way the Democrats can stop Mike Johnson from taking the office? Not that I'm aware of. I think that's the pecking order, so to speak. So no, I don't believe so. Next up, the conservatives in this country know the depths of corruption of the Democrats. How they show their own voters that they don't matter, and they'll run whatever Manchurian candidate they choose. Defrauding of Democrat voters, just like communist China. Yeah, the Democrats have had a long history, and I guess I became first aware of it when Bernie never stood a chance to win. He had those big, successful campaigns, but in the end of the day, the fix was in. The power brokers, the Clintons, and others behind the scenes had already chosen the winners. So I've always felt that the Democrats don't really believe in their own voters. And I think this is just more proof. It is ironic that we got lectured so often about being a threat to democracy. And time again, the Democrats have proved that's only a talking point for them. Another comment, there is no change for Democrats, as it is still the same old leaders behind the new leader, just a new laughing puppet. However, seriously, a great job in your research, Frank, as that takes so much time. We all appreciate it. Well, thank you. I like it's interesting at this time, this historic time that we've been in. You can't do show prep the night before. Now, I was never one to believe that you could anyway. But yes, this is as fresh of stories as I can get to you, as I got in at about 4 o'clock to get the newest information to you. Let's see. Tulsi Gabbard. Some people wanted Tulsi Gabbard to be Trump's vice president. She says that Kamala Harris is just a figurehead for the deep state. It's been the greatest, although that's Biden's statement. Gabbard said Biden's out, Kamala's in. Don't be fooled. Policies won't change. Just like Biden wasn't the one calling the shots, Kamala Harris won't be either. She is the new figurehead for the deep state and the maidservant of Hillary Clinton, queen of the cabal of warmongers. They will continue their efforts to engulf the world in war and taking away our liberty. That's Tulsi Gabbard. As I said, many people on Tulsi Gabbard many people believed that Tulsi Gabbard would make a great VP pick for Trump. But of course, as many of us said, she is noted to be a Democrat at one point. So just something to keep in mind. Now, all state Democrat Party chairs have endorsed Harris at this point. Following President Biden's announcement, our members immediately assembled to unite behind the candidate who has a track record of winning tough elections and who is a proven leader on the issues that matter to Americans: reproductive freedom, gun violence prevention, climate protection, justice reform, and rebuilding the economy, said Ken Martin. That person is our sitting vice president, Kamala Harris. Now, weirdly, the New York Times board wants Kamala Harris out. The New York Times, they're laser-like focused on making sure Trump does not win the presidency. That's all they care about. They've said it. They don't have to be fair. So they must think that perhaps Harris doesn't have what it takes. The board said, by agreeing to step down when his term ends in January, Biden is greatly increasing the chance that his party is able to protect the nation from the dangers of returning to a Donald Trump presidency. Choosing Ms. Harris would be a reasonable path for Democrats to take. She has been Mr. Biden's running mate, and while no votes were cast for her as a presidential candidate in primaries, the president's voters expected her to be on the ticket in November. Nonetheless, party delegates should have a voice in a decision of this consequence. There are other qualified Democrats who could take on Mr. Trump and win, and picking a candidate without a real contest is how the party got into the position of anointing a standard bearer that large majorities of Democrats and independents have profound concerns about. While the hour is late, there is still plenty of time to put leading candidates through the process of public scrutiny before the party's nominating convention begins on August 19th, to inform the choice of a nominee and to build public trust. Do you think they'll do that, or do you think Harris just pretty much gets it? Do you think there will be a kind of an open convention? Will others step up to run against Harris? It's a fair question to ask. It seems like I'm surprised the New York Times took that strong stance because if she, at the end of the day, gets it, they're going to support her wholeheartedly. And as I mentioned, there's already been these glowing puff pieces about Harris and how strong she is, how this is that she's a trailblazer, eyeing America's last glass ceiling. Despite blazing a trail as the first woman, black and South Asian vice president in the nation's history, the 59-year-old Democrat long struggled with approval ratings as bad or worse than Biden's. The last 12 months, however, have revealed a transformed Harris. And with Biden's endorsement in hand, after he stunned the world by dropping out of his re-election bid, she's suddenly on the cusp of history. You're going to see a lot of glowing pieces about Kamala Harris. Prepare for that in the upcoming days. So, our governor, though, Governor Kathy Hochul, has endorsed, quote, champion of justice Kamala Harris. Now, I know there was a lot of criticism of her when she was, a DA prosecuting so many people for marijuana crimes at a time now where we look at states legalizing it. Kamala is a champion of justice, says Governor Hochul, who will fight every single day for a woman's right to choose, for middle-class families, and for the integrity of our democracy. Bill and Hillary came right out of the gate and endorsed Kamala. very quickly. We are honored to join the president in endorsing Vice President Harris, and we'll do whatever we can to support her. It's interesting how Bill was kind of a social pariah there for a while during the Me Too movement. Not so much now. Now's the time to support Kamala Harris and fight with everything we've got to elect her. America's future depends on it. Some donors have grown squeamish about opening up their coffers to the Biden-Harris campaign originally. Harris had a call with about 300 donors last Friday in a bid to reassure them about the ticket. The 81-year-old Biden is older than both Bill and Hillary. He is the oldest president in U.S. history, though former President Donald Trump may top that if he wins in November. Both of the Clintons lauded Biden for his performance in office. President Biden has capped his extraordinary career of service with a presidency that has lifted America out of the unprecedented pandemic, created millions of new jobs, rebuilt a battered economy, strengthened our democracy, and restored our standing in the world. How do you say restored our standing in the world? Anyway, by any measure, he has advanced our founders' charge to build a more perfect union and his own stated goal of restoring the soul of our nation. So I wonder what it's going to look like. I mean, he's not going to be done criticizing Trump. I mean, this just opens up his campaign, not to be president, but to just be, kind of ruthless as a lame duck. It's going to get interesting now. Schumer and Jeffries and Pelosi mum on endorsing Harris. Same with Obama. They don't mention him here. We're going to talk about that when we come back from break. But Obama not really endorsing Harris. And I think some of the quote-unquote power movers, the kingmakers, they don't want to get too far ahead of themselves if they think that they can find a better candidate than Harris, because Harris has never really been that popular. Her biggest claim to fame when she ran for president the first time was the fact that she called her now boss a bigot. But she never made it to one single vote in the primary. She was out before that. So it's going to be, wow, we live in historic times. Do you believe, like the one viewer said, that be careful what you wish for? I think there's a point to be made there. So we'll answer all your questions, read all your comments if we can. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Can't believe hour number one's done. We've got the beginning of hour number two's moving right along. We still are going to talk to Joe Barlow here in just a little bit. So stay right there. We're having a great, frankly speaking. I'm so glad that you're part of it. We'll be right back. Reading all these great comments coming in. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I am your host, Frank Acom. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. Our Steuben Senior Services Fund section of the program coming up in just a few moments as Joe Barlow will be our guest. Let's take a look at some comments from viewers regarding reproductive rights. President Trump is not against reproductive rights, but rather says, let the state handle the issue. This makes perfect sense given the Bible Belt, meaning that Democrats would rather push their beliefs on said Bible Belt states. Another comment from a different viewer. Good morning, Frank. Good morning. I'm getting a late start this morning, so this may have already been said. But tell me why Joe dropped out when all we have heard from his talking heads is what a great job he's been doing and how much he has accomplished, etc. Yeah, I mean, they have been covering this up and been lying to you. Now, it got to the point where the debate just made it too obvious. I think most of us knew well before that there was a mental decline, but that showed to the American people that the media had no problem lying and no problem covering up for how many years. And now they sheepishly, not even, I mean, they have no problem right now acting as if that never happened, as if this was obvious this should happen. It is. The hypocrisy is amazing when it comes to the media, isn't it? So frustrating. Oh, man, a lot of comments coming in. We'll get to those after the next break, after we talk with Joe Barlow. So, yes, Schumer, Jeffries, Pelosi, Obama, they have not endorsed Harris as of this morning. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries refrained from mentioning Harris in their initial statement Sunday, even as Biden immediately threw his support behind her. Former Speaker Pelosi, still one of the party's most influential figures, also did not mention Harris. That doesn't mean they won't secure the backing, that she won't secure the backing of those and other senior Democrats soon. Top congressional Democrats focused their initial public comments on an outpouring of support for Biden. Barack Obama doesn't endorse Harris, says Democrats will pick an outstanding nominee. Obama, who's 62, did you realize that, was joined by former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and not immediately backing the 59-year-old vice president, following reports last week that both favored an open process to replace Biden. We will be navigating uncharted waters in the days ahead, Obama said. But I have extraordinary confidence that the leaders of our party will be able to create a process from which an outstanding nominee emerges. I believe that Joe Biden's vision of a generous, prosperous, and united America that provides opportunities for everyone will be on full display at the Democratic Convention in August. And I expect that every single one of us who are prepared to carry that message of hope and progress forward in November and beyond. Oh, that's interesting. So will Joe still, I guess Joe will still be speaking at the convention. This is really uncharted waters. I understand what Obama's saying there. For now, Michelle and I just want to express our love and gratitude to Joe and Jill for leading us so ably and courageously during these perilous times, and for the commitment to the ideals of freedom and equality that this country was founded on. Interesting. Well, what do you think? Will there be an open convention type scenario? Do you think there will be some type of rushed primary so Democrats actually have a say in who they vote for? I don't think so. I don't think the powers that be in the Democrat Party really care what their voters feel, what they think. So just like they were trying to rush the virtual roll call to nominate Biden, because again, at the end of the day, all that matters was for them to win an election. And that's why it's never about Biden's health, mental health. It's always been about his electability. That's all that they care about. Joe Manchin is considering rejoining Democrats to run against Kamala Harris now that Biden has stepped aside. Before leaving the Democrat Party to stand as an independent in May, Manchin announced that he would not seek re-election to his Senate seat, but seemed to backtrack when pressed about it earlier this summer. You never leave any political opportunities or walk away from them. So you always have options because life is full of surprises. But I have no intention of running for political office. We will see. Kamala Harris is officially running for president. Will any Democrats challenge her? NBC News is asking. In a way, Biden's momentous decision moves up a long-anticipated 2028 Democratic primary campaign that is expected to feature a broadcast of rising stars in the party. But the sudden start and a shortened 4-month timeline means Harris starts out with a massive advantage, a campaign apparatus, and millions in funds she can inherit, as well as rapid endorsements from broad swaths of the parties eager to quickly settle on a nominee. It's far from clear any prominent Democrats will challenge Harris in what could be a murky process to replace Biden. If the party coalesces around her, some of those future presidential prospects could become contenders for her vice presidential pick. Who do you see as being that pick? Probably Gavin Newsom. I see he already endorsed. Look at all these comments coming in. Sorry, I can't read them live on the air. I will when we come back for break. We're going to talk with Joe Barlow, and then after that, we will read all your comments. So keep those comments coming in. But NBC, not really sure if there will be any challengers. We're going to talk more about that. One other non-Biden related thing that I wanted to mention before I forgot, something for you to keep in mind. Director Kimberly Cheadle of the Secret Service will testify today before a House committee on her agency's failure to prevent an assassination attempt on former President Trump during a rally in Pennsylvania. Congressional Republicans have been pushing for her to resign, and Speaker Mike Johnson pledged the hearing would be must-see TV. Over the weekend, the Secret Service reportedly admitted to denying requests for additional personnel for Trump's security team for 2 years. A 180 from a statement given shortly after the failed assassination. Requests were not made for the Butler, PA rally. So that'll be must-watch TV for all of you that are interested. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, Joe Barlow will be our guest, and then we'll read your comments. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We will be right back. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We're broadcasting from the Hesselson studio, and this is the Stu Benz Senior Services Fund section of our program. Joe's back in the studio, so thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Frank, for having me on again.
So it's getting close. Last time you were on, we were talking about Summer Sing. Tell us about it.
Yes. Well, it's an event we're having. It's Crystal Chords is a women's a cappella chorus, and we sing in 4-part harmony. And we decided this summer that it would really be fun to invite women from the community to come and sing with us. Yeah. Just informally, but we're doing this 4 Tuesday nights in August. That's our regular rehearsal night.
Okay. Would you recommend if someone wants to participate, they should block off they want to go to each one, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Because when you're learning music, when you're just getting started, you find that as you rehearse another night and another night, it just gets better and better, and the song really comes together, and you wouldn't want to miss part of that. So, yeah, it's good to try to come to all 4.
What's it feel like when you know you've got the song down? So when the people join you on that 4th and they hear it finally from what they heard at the beginning to the end, that must be a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, it's like night and day, because when it comes together, there's this real synergy that comes together, where all the music is balanced in the 4 parts, and it's just a joyful sound. Whereas at the beginning, you're kind of wonky. You're just trying to get through and get the notes right and all of that.
Sure.
Later on, you're adding in the fun stuff, which is the nuances, the emotion, where to sing smoothly, where to sing differently. So, it's pretty cool.
What would you say to someone that's thinking about attending? What level would they need to be in singing capability?
Oh, gosh. We're not looking for professional musicians.
Okay.
When I joined the chorus, I was not a musician at all, just singing in the car, singing around the house. So we provide a lot of learning, and that's part of our mission, because we're a nonprofit, is to teach people to be better singers. So we send out learning tracks, audio tracks, that would be just the part that you're trying to learn, whether it's the lead part or the baritone part or whatever. And then we also send out the sheet music for people who are good with reading music.
Okay.
I find I learn best by doing both together. I'm not really great at learning music, but when I listen to my part and then read the notes, it just helps me learn better.
So if they register and it's at crystalchords.com, you'll get them set up with all of that?
Yeah, and the best way to it's the best way to do it is to register, so we can send all that stuff out ahead of time, and you'll have the sheet music.
And where will they be meeting each Tuesday night in August?
Well, we rehearse at the First United Methodist Church in Horseheads.
Okay.
So that's where we're going to be for this event, as usual. And all the information's on our website, crystalchords.com. So you can go there and click to register. There's information about how to do that.
And just quickly, we'll go on a kind of side tangent here, because people, of course, remember you from the Salvation Army Telethon, which was so much fun.
That was fun.
I heard you guys did an amazing job at Langworthy's event.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
Yeah. I heard it was, and I heard that was a really special event, too.
It was amazing to be there. I was so honored to be asked to sing there.
Yeah.
So we did the Star Spangled Banner, and for the veterans, for the Vietnam vets, it was just a cool thing.
Yeah, and
we
I'm glad
were honored.
you were a little bit on the news, too, and I'm glad to see that, because I knew that you were preparing for. How long does something like that take to prepare?
Well, we always keep that song,
well, of course,
the national anthem, handy, and we practice it all the time so that we're ready for any events that come up, because this summer we've had some events where we've sung it. Yeah.
Because you were at Dunn Field, too, right? Did I hear Dunn?
We were. We sang for the Pioneers game.
You guys got it down.
That was fun.
You found your market. I love it. Well, you do such an amazing job. But if it's a different show that you're putting on, how long does it take, do you feel, to learn a song and be ready to perform it from beginning to end?
Oh, gosh. Well, our director, Donna McKay, guides us in all of this. But we spend really months getting songs ready. We're getting ready right now we're starting to learn our holiday music for the holiday show in December. We're getting ready for our contest and convention with Harmony Incorporated. That's in November.
Oh, yeah.
So we have 2 songs that we'll do there, one ballad and one uptune. We spend a long time, but what we do is at each rehearsal we mix it up. So we don't just go crazy on one song.
Sure.
It's all mixed up. Yeah, we do a little of this and a little of that, and by the time the event comes, we're ready.
Is it weird, as you know, the last few weeks it's been hundreds of degrees, it seems like. Is it weird to be singing Christmas music?
Well, we're just used to it, because we know if we don't start now, we're not going to be ready.
And you have a lot of Christmas events typically, right?
We do. Well, we have
League.
we have the Arctic League. Last year we had 2 concerts. We were asked to sing an extra holiday concert.
Nice.
So I don't know if we'll have 2 this year, but we'll definitely have our holiday concert at the church in December. Yeah. And we invite guests to that, too, to sing with us. Is
the song that you'll be learning on the Summer Sing, which is the 4 Tuesday nights in August, is that a secret, or can you tell people?
No, it's 1,000 Years by Christina Perry, which is an awesome song. We just love it, and it's a really beautiful arrangement. So we're doing a little practicing now to get ready for Summer Sing so that we can help the other singers that come to join us to learn. and we love the arrangement. It's going to be very pretty.
Well, I know you have prepared another song for us, and we always appreciate that. That's why I keep having you on. I want to hear those songs.
Yeah.
Keep promoting it. But before we go, what should people know about Summer Sing?
It's just going to be a fun, relaxed event just for us to all have a good time together. And all the information's on crystalchords.com. Okay. So please register ahead of time so that we can get you the learning tracks and the sheet music.
All right, before we go, and Joe, thanks so much for being on the show. Best of luck with the Summer Sing.
Thanks.
Would you like to introduce a song?
Yes. Well, this is the Mach 4 Quartet. They're very good.
They are.
And they're singing a classic Broadway show tune.
All right, great. Here we go.
Never could carry a tune, never knew where to start, and you came along just when everything was wrong, and put a song in my heart, dear. When you smiled at me, I heard a melody. It haunted me from the start, Something inside of me started a symphony. Zing went the strings of my heart, my heart went zing. 'Twas like a breath of spring. Zing. I heard a robin sing, zing, about a nest set apart, and then all nature seemed to be in perfect harmony. Zing went the strings of my heart, Your eyes made sky seem blue again. What else could I do again but keep repeating through again? I love you, love you. Well, I still recall the thrill, and I guess I always will. I hope it will never depart, dear. With your lips to mine, I hear a song divine. Sing went the strings of my, sing went the strings of my, sing went the strings of my heart, of my heart, of my heart.
And we are back. Thank you so much to Joe Barlow for being a part of the Steuben Senior Services Fund section of our program. I hope that you can all join the Crystal Chords for that fun event throughout August. Okay, we have a lot of comments that have been coming in. Let's get right to them. Frank, thanks for ruining my day. You said that Kathy Hochul isn't leaning Republican. Nope, sorry. And that I totally missed National Ice Cream Day. We'll try again tomorrow. Yes, sorry, I was not aware of National Ice Cream Day either. There is something kind of poetic about the president deciding not to run for re-election on National Ice Cream Day, because we know very often the media covers his love of ice cream. Also very often asked by the the real tough journalists what his favorite ice cream flavor is. So there's something kind of bookendish about that. Can a former president become vice president? This is a different comment from a different viewer. In fact, the relevant constitutional provisions, their histories, and their purpose all point to the same conclusion. A twice before elected president may become vice president either through appointment or through election, and like any other vice president, may thereafter succeed from that office to the presidency. That makes Barack Obama eligible to be VP. Talk about flipping over the chessboard. Yes, that would be something. But the way things are going right now, I don't know. I don't know what to think. Next up, different comment, or different viewer, I should say. Haven't heard anything from Jill Biden. She has got to be, as Trump would say, hugely disappointed. Yeah, she loved being first lady. She loved kind of the great things that came with that. Obviously trying to keep Joe in it, keep Joe getting him reelected, those type of things. Another comment. Yeah, we got a lot of comments coming in. The primary vote would have been different if the news showed how bad he is, meaning Biden. Now they can control who is in the seat. They don't want the voice of the people. This is the Democratic Party. They have a history of not trusting their voters or any voters for that matter. So there's something to be said about that. And yes, the media has lied to us about this for 3.5 years. So now watching them cover it is awkward, but they don't feel any tinge of hypocrisy or anything like that. It's just business as usual. It's the same thing that happened with Hunter when they never reported on the laptop, and then when the kind of their hands were forced when he's at trial, they had to go back and retell the story that so many of us already knew. Another comment. I absolutely agree with the "be careful what you wish for" adage. I wanted Cuomo out, and look what we have now. Very, very good point. Let's see. Here's another comment from a different viewer. Morning, Frank. Good morning. Simple statement. Cheadle should be fired immediately for incompetence, at least. Very good point. There is going to be that hearing today. All right, let's get back to it. Thank you for all the comments. Keep them coming in. President Biden dropping out could force an open convention at the DNC. That would be perhaps the most interesting. We'll put it that way. Maybe entertaining. If Democrats want to get a nominee on the ballot in all 50 states, they have to start putting forward names by August the 7th. The deadline in Ohio, the earliest in the country. The Democratic National Convention doesn't begin until August 19th, 12 days after the Ohio deadline. But Biden's decision could still revive a decades-lost practice of delegates choosing their candidate on the convention floor. Biden finally bowed Sunday to mounting calls for his fellow Democrats to reconsider seeking a second term. We know all about that. I don't have to keep you updated on that. The current DNC rules state, quote, delegates elected to the National Convention pledged to a presidential candidate shall in all good conscience reflect the sentiment of those who elected them. Biden has 3,896 pledged delegates that he won in primaries and caucuses when he effectively faced no opposition. However, with Biden out of the race, the delegates would be free to vote for whomever tossed their hat in the ring. Biden's exit allows other Democrat candidates to enter the race and attempt to lobby the delegates before voting day. At present, the DNC is expected to hold a virtual roll call to choose the nominee between August 1st and August 7th. That vote was expected to be Biden's formal coronation as the nominee. However, that vote could be postponed to give prospective nominees more time for electioneering. Biden has endorsed Harris to replace him on top of the ticket, but DNC rules do not have an enforcement mechanism to make Biden's choice binding. The president said last week, in the midst of this open rebellion, the delegates are obviously free to do whatever they want, but predicted an open convention against him was not going to happen. All bets are off now. DNC delegate Elaine Kamerick co-hosted an information Zoom on Friday with Delegates Our Democracy, explaining the rules of delegates who are confused about the long-dormant possibility of an open convention. Boy, that's going to be interesting if there is. That's way things used to be. A broker convention would pit Democrat candidates and their delegates against each other on the convention floor next month. In that scenario, all delegates would show up to the United Center in Chicago uncommitted. The public view deals would be brokered by state and local party officials and elected politicians to commit delegates to certain candidates. I just think, though, this is just kind of political wonky, fun mind games. I just don't see a scenario where it's not Harris just because of the money and the campaign apparatus. The DNC announced plans in May to formally renominate Biden and Harris in a virtual roll call prior to the convention. If the DNC follows through with that plan and Harris or another candidate receives the necessary amount of delegate votes, it would eliminate any chance of open or brokered convention. The Ohio legislature passed a bill in late May that extended the state's ballot access deadline from August 7th to September 1st. Okay. We got other comments coming in we'll get to here in just a little bit. Did you see that Aaron Sorkin, who was the creator of Veep, or I'm sorry, not Veep, West Wing, a political type show, he kind of endorsed Mitt Romney as the VP. Hours after an op-ed by Aaron Sorkin was published in the New York Times in which he suggested Democrats put forward Republican Senator Mitt Romney as their candidate to defeat Trump this November. The Oscar-winning screenwriter had a change of heart and instantly came back out. I take it back, Harris for America. Boy, he must have got some pushback from his liberal buddies, huh? Whew. He must have started getting an earful. How dare you suggest a Republican, even one that is so wishy-washy and very much like a Democrat himself, someone like Mitt Romney. But whoa, never mind. I take it all back. Harris for America. The delegates will decide the next Democratic nominee as a groundswell forms for Harris, says CNN. So you can see the media is already saying, no, we don't want any shenanigans. We want this to be Harris and just move along. We want to be able to start building her up and tearing down Trump. So no more of this chaos. They don't want to be the party of chaos any longer. Harris' swift ascent provides some rare good news for Democrats who have been agonizing over Biden's fate for weeks. Biden's endorsement has weight, but no formal bearing on the process. The makeup of ticket now rests with the roughly 4,700 delegates who will, in the coming weeks, vote for a new standard bearer. Every one of us, meaning delegates, were vetted and worked for Biden or the Biden campaign in some way, whether we volunteered or donated or something. They are all Biden's people. So the Democrats' civil war, we'll talk about it when we come back. We're doing good on time. Maybe we'll be able to get, who do you think would be Harris's running mate? I've got a couple articles here. One from, I think it was The Hill, the other one from New York Post, of just some names being thrown around. We'll talk about that in a little bit. I'll be taking more of your comments. We'll try to read as many of them on the air as we possibly can. Thank you again to Joe Barlow for being a guest on the program this morning. Boy, we had a lot of great guests last week, and we're already hitting the ground running with guests this week. Now, someday this week, and I don't know which day, I'm going to have Terry McBride of McBride and the Ride. You may recall that band. We have been promoting that interview for quite some time. The reason I put it off is there's been such historic news every single day. And last week it just didn't seem appropriate to play that with the news of the assassination attempt on former President Trump. So this week we will get to that. We've got a couple other guests on as well this week. I'll tell you more about it. But I wanted to make sure that Joe Barlow was featured today because they do such a great job with the Crystal Chords, and that sounds like a fun summer event throughout August. So let's take a break. Stay with us. Keep those comments coming in, and we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. And we are back with Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. A comment from a viewer. I try to stay out of politics. I have never voted in 35 years, but this one I will not stay out of. I'm voting this November. Love to all Americans, we the people. Thank you very much for that. Another comment from a different viewer. I would think that the Democratic Party will promote a VP candidate that will be the 2028 presidential candidate to set up a 4-year campaign. I would think so too. That, or they figure that with the assassination attempt, something like that, that maybe Trump is very difficult to beat. So maybe that's why they're letting Harris kind of take the dive, maybe? I don't know. I mean, she's more popular than Biden, but I don't know. I don't know what this does for the race. But yes, you would think they'd want someone like a Gavin Newsom, somebody in the VP slot that will be ready to run if Harris were to win. But I'm going to continue. The New York Post editorial board put it this way: Democrats' civil war isn't over. Grab the popcorn for some chaotic days ahead. President Biden may have anointed Harris as his successor and turned his online fundraising apparatus over to her, but the delegates will have to agree. It's not yet clear whether party leadership, let alone the donors, are united. Before Joe dropped, ex-President Barack Obama and others were said to favor some kind of mini primary ahead of the August 19th convention. Obama pointedly failed to endorse Harris or even mention her name Sunday. Yes, if they just look as if the Kingmakers just picked her Is that really the optics you want from a party that lectures so much about democracy? But that suggests what Obama's comment was. That suggests a clear lack of faith in Harris, and understandably so. Top donors had called for a truly open convention too. Tellingly, not all party leaders who jumped in to thank Biden for his service on Sunday joined in the Harrison coronation. The Clintons did. Obama and Chuck Schumer did not. Maybe there is no consensus yet. Or perhaps the leaders don't want to look like they've already plotted out the entire transition. After all, while polls show most Democrat voters wanted a younger candidate, plenty of grassroots activists have furiously slammed the leaders for suddenly pushing to set aside the actual primary vote. And don't discount the ambition of some top contenders, their donors, and their consultants, who will see this as their guys' or gals' big chance. No single faction can stop anyone from declaring. Sadly, we can't trust any public statement at this point. After all, virtually all those folks have been utterly two-faced for the last month at the very least. Most of them, and much of the media, were on the cheap fake bandwagon against the Post and others, flagging Biden's drastic decline until that fateful debate, and some of them even after. As a rule, we despise conspiracy theories. We think all the behind-the-scenes maneuvering that pushed Biden out was individuals privately concerned about what was best for the party and acting on their own, albeit in quasi-concert. Facing the fact that Biden would plainly lead the party to disaster in November, what choice did they have? But that doesn't mean they agree on what's best for the party or the nation moving ahead, nor even on what they can pull off. Is the goal now to find a nominee who really could win, or just one who can somehow reunite the party and not lose too badly? Plan another 4 years of resistance and aim to take back the White House in 2028. And that was kind of my point. I don't know the answer to that. Say what you think. Governor Josh Shapiro, with another swing stater as his running mate, is the best bet to beat Trump Vance. Can you really convince the delegates to embrace a guy who's well to their right? Example. Shapiro is open to educational choice. That's not good with the teachers' unions. And if you can muscle the delegates into holding their noses to nominate him, aren't you making a mockery of democracy, supposedly what Dems are trying to preserve against with the Trump threat? Just going with Harris, who was elected Veep twice and was already on the ticket, might be the most dramatic thing. Just going with Harris, who was elected Veep twice. What? Anyway, or maybe it's having the convention draft Hillary Clinton, the party's last nominee before Biden, or perhaps it's the Obama mini primary scheme. It's far too late to actually restage the real primaries. Everyone knows Harris will likely be roughly as terrible as Biden. She's stuck with his record. Her primary campaign for the 2020 nomination was a humiliation, and she's nearly as bad off-the-cuff public speaking as Biden before his decline. Frankly, or after his decline. Frankly, if the party had an alternative clearly superior to Biden, everyone wouldn't have conspired so long to hide his true state. That is, they have consensus on Plan A, stick with Joe through November. When they saw that was a disaster, everyone rushed to push out a delicate task that wound up taking weeks and left Biden furious at what he sees as backstabbing betrayal. You have to wonder if anointing Harris was just his revenge. It looks to us like party leaders didn't have a chance to agree on a Plan B and only have weeks to try. Now they're really scrambling. Boy, it's going to make for some interesting, frankly speakings, isn't it? We'll take a look at some of the names being thrown around, a couple other things as we wrap up today's edition of Frankly Speaking. So please stay with us. Get those last-minute comments in before we call it a day. Our beautiful view of Market Street as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all the comments this morning. We had some great back and forth. I can't thank you enough. So whom would Kamala Harris pick as VP? Here are 10 possibilities by Ryan King. Pete Buttigieg. I actually heard his name thrown around quite a bit in all of this. Gavin Newsom, which Gavin Newsom has been very, well, kind of running a shadow campaign behind the scenes. Andy Beshear, the Kentucky governor. Gretchen Whitmer, the Michigan governor. J.B. Pritzker. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker has more than enough money to make a serious bid. Then you've got Josh Shapiro out of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's governor. Roy Cooper, North Carolina governor. And Wes Moore, how about this? Elizabeth Warren. Amy Klobuchar, Isn't that, those are some interesting names that we haven't heard from in quite some time. Amy Klobuchar, never know if we said that right. She ran, as you may recall, for president. Now, on the other side of the coin, the Hill mentions some names of who they think could be the likely VP pick. Andy Beshear mentions that name. Pete Buttigieg, Mayor Pete, if you may recall. Roy Cooper, so a lot of the same similar names. Mark Kelly is a different one, who's become an influential voice for national Democrats. He's the Arizona senator, serving in the Senate since 2020. Maryland Governor Wes Moore, another major rising star in the Democrat Party. Gavin Newsom, of course. J.B. Pritzker, Josh Shapiro, and Gretchen Whitmer. So we're going to see a lot of the same types of names being thrown around for potential VP. Now, this is what we've been saying this morning, and Rich Lowry put it succinctly, as he always does. Oh, we got a comment here from a viewer first. Thanks for yet another great show. I'm definitely looking forward to this week's comments. Me too. I love all the comments that we received. Thank you so much for the kind words. Okay, Rich Lowry said they didn't soulfully consider Joe Biden's marked decline and decide for the good of him, his party, and the country that he had to step down. They lied and they got caught is what it was. The Democrat Party line on President Biden was that he had turned in an exceptionally effective State of the Union address. He might mess up a name here or there, but he had gotten better with age. He should be judged on his achievements, which rivaled those of LBJ. Anything suggesting he was in decline was a paranoid lie or a cheap fake. Everything we saw with our own eyes was misleading. No, he hadn't wandered off the G7 summit. No, he hadn't frozen up at his Hollywood fundraiser. Nope, everything was fine. No one formally enforced the party line, but everyone knew to follow it. Democrat leaders, journalists, and donors. The whispered conversations stayed whispered. Then the debate happened, and before it had ended, the party line was inoperative. There was attempts to revive it, but it was a little like being a communist in the 30s when Stalin wrenched the party into a totally new position. It doesn't matter whether the new had any connection to the prior line. It had to be followed. So Joe Scarborough, who months earlier had issued forth with table-thumping assurances that Joe Biden was at the absolute top of his game, suddenly thought he might have to step aside. George Clooney, who co-hosted the aforementioned Hollywood fundraiser, wrote in the New York Times that Biden was a shadow of himself. The president can be forgiven for being disappointed and angry that everyone who had been covering for him switched overnight. There's no honor among thieves. But shouldn't there be at least a little among political co-conspirators? Biden showed monumentally poor judgment in deciding to run again last year. He almost certainly was in the grips of legitimate self-delusion. His enablers were truly cynical and dishonest, hoping that their fake narrative about Biden's continued vitality could see them through until November. Their credibility should be shot as they attempt their great switcheroo, Rich Lowry says. The same Democrat establishment that gave you Joe Biden without offering Democrat voters a legitimate choice now wants to give you Harris without offering Democrat voters a legitimate choice. The same party that lied about Joe Biden without compunction or remorse now wants you to credit everything it is going to tell us about the marvelous, heretofore underappreciated qualities of Kamala Harris. The same vice president who insisted, as of roughly the day before yesterday, that Joe Biden was a very picture of energy and effectiveness, now wants us to believe everything else she's going to say after he's been forced from the race by his feeble state. The same people who thought Joe Biden was incapable of doing interviews and teleprompter speeches on the campaign trail will tell us he's perfectly capable of fulfilling his duties in the most trying job on the planet. Finally, the same Democrats who were threatening Joe Biden with exclusion if he stayed in the race a couple more weeks now want us to buy their great statesmanship line. In sum, the perpetrators of a shameful cover-up want us to move on as if nothing happened, when the stink of their rank deception should dog their candidate and their party the rest of this campaign. Here's a comment from a viewer. Buttigieg is as good at his job as Kamala is as border czar. Just ask the folks at East Palestine, Ohio. So I guess that would qualify him as a VP. That's a very good point. All right, chaos ensues among Democrats as DNC chair fails to publicly delineate plan for what's next when Biden dropping out. Boy, we are out of time. Forcing Biden out of this campaign may have been more about Congress than the actual White House. Yes, they were talking about how it could really affect down ballot voting. Democrats rigged the primary for Biden only to end up pushing him out. Well, we are out of time. I can keep reading the headlines. Though there is an interesting piece. I'm not a big Piers Morgan guy, but Piers Morgan has an article out in the New York Post. The phone call from Donald Trump that convinced me he's headed back to the White House. And there's another one from the editorial board at the New York Post. Trump plans to nix taxes on tips, concretely show he's pro-working class. That does it for today. Thank you to everybody who joined us. Thank you to Joe Barlow and the Crystal Chords and Mach 4 for being our guest this morning. Make sure you tune in every weekday morning starting at 6 a.m. for Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV. Big Fox, we will see you tomorrow morning, bright and early. I look forward to it already.